My own son had me declared mentally incompetent and locked away for 14 months. And the morning I walked out of that facility, I was more dangerous than he had ever imagined. I'm glad you're here with me. Follow this story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Because what I'm about to tell you changed every single thing I understood about family, trust, and what it means to fight for yourself when the people you love most become your greatest threat. My name is Isadora Whitmore, and this is my story. Day 427. I made a mark on the inside cover of my Bible. A thin pencil line, one of hundreds I'd been adding since the day my son had me admitted to Sunridge Memory Care in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The morning light through the window was the pale gray of November. The room smelled of cafeteria eggs and lavender air freshener, the kind that tries too hard and fails completely. Tomorrow I was going home. My roommate, Olive, 81 years old, sharp as a new blade, and in here because her daughter thought she needed supervision after a fall 3 years prior, looked up from her crossword puzzle. She did a crossword every morning in pen, never pencil. "You've got that look again," she said. "What look?" "The one where you're planning something." Olive set the puzzle down. Most women counting down to their last day in a place like this are pacing the halls. You've been sitting there still as a judge. I allowed myself a small smile. Maybe I'm about to pass sentence. Olive had heard my story. Everyone in the East Wing had, eventually. The retired hospital administrator, 32 years managing St. Dominic's, the largest regional medical center in South Louisiana, who had supposedly had a breakdown at her son's office, who could no longer manage her own finances, who needed court-appointed oversight for her own protection. Every word of it a lie. But the truth has a way of staying buried when the people telling the lies own the shovel. I stood and looked at my reflection in the small mirror above the bathroom sink. 14 months had changed me. My dark hair was almost fully gray now. I had stopped asking the aides to help me color it. My face had more lines. I had lost 12 pounds from the institutional food and from the quiet, unrelenting stress of existing in a place where every decision about your own life required someone else's signature. But my eyes were different in a way I hadn't expected. They weren't broken. They were finished with being patient. "Olive," I said, turning from the mirror, "do you know what you learn when someone strips away your right to make your own decisions?" She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "You learn exactly what those decisions were worth. And you learn who was worth fighting for." She smiled, that slow, knowing smile of an 81-year-old woman who has outlived every person who ever underestimated her. "Is your daughter ready?" "She's been ready for a year." Olive nodded and picked up her crossword again. "Then God help your boy." 14 months earlier, I had not yet understood what my son had become. Garrison was 37. He had his father's jaw and his father's eyes, dark and earnest-looking, the kind of eyes that made people trust him before he had done anything to deserve it. My husband Ellis had been dead 4 years by then. We had spent 38 years building something real together, a home in the Garden District, 3 rental properties in Metairie, retirement accounts that represented decades of careful, unglamorous work. When Ellis died, he left me secure, stable, not wealthy by anyone's flashy standard, but mine, completely mine. Garrison had come to me 18 months before my commitment with a stack of papers. Estate planning documents, he called them. "Just making sure everything is organized, Mom. You don't want to be a burden if something happens." I remember thinking that was an odd word to use. Burden. I had been taking care of myself since before he was born. I signed some of them. He was my son. I trusted him. What I didn't know was what my daughter Maura had already begun to suspect. Maura was 34, a CPA with a firm in New Orleans, quiet in the way of people who notice everything and say little. She had been watching Garrison's behavior for almost a year before I caught anything myself. Small things. He asked more questions about the rental properties than was necessary. He mentioned, more than once, a developer interested in the Metairie units. He introduced us to his new financial advisor, a friend of his wife Fallon's, a man with an expensive watch and suspiciously vague answers. Maura tried to tell me once. I didn't listen the way I should have. Then I found the transfer records myself. I had been going through Ellis's old files looking for a warranty document for the HVAC unit at one of the rentals. Tucked inside a folder labeled 2019 Maintenance was a bank statement I did not recognize. One of the accounts I had signed over to Garrison's management 8 months earlier. 3 transfers, $60,000 each, to a company called Fallon River Consulting LLC. I looked it up, registered in Delaware, address a UPS store mailbox on Veterans Boulevard. My daughter-in-law's company, her name, her address, my money. I should have called an attorney right then. I know that now. But he was my son, and I still believed in the possibility of a conversation. So instead, I drove to his office on a Tuesday afternoon and made the worst tactical mistake of my life. I told him I knew. What happened next still makes my jaw tighten. Garrison's face did something strange when I laid that bank statement on his desk. Not guilt, not panic, something calculated. He glanced at Fallon, who had appeared in the doorway behind me, and, in that one look, passed something I couldn't decode. Then Fallon started crying. "Mother Whitmore," she said, her voice breaking, "we've been so worried about you." Garrison. She came in confused this morning. She was at the wrong floor for 20 minutes. She didn't remember where your office was. That's not true. I turned to face her. I went to the wrong elevator bank, once. I've been here twice in 3 years. She's been doing this, Fallon told Garrison, speaking as though I were furniture. The memory gaps. Last month she called me 3 times in one afternoon and didn't remember the first 2 calls. I called twice, I said steadily. About the Metairie roof. I documented both calls. Garrison stood and put his hand on my shoulder. "Mom, I think you need to sit down. You look exhausted. Can I call someone for you?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw it. Not concern, not remorse. Relief. He had been waiting for an excuse, and I had walked in and handed him one myself. 2 hours later, an ambulance arrived at his office. Fallon had called 911 while Garrison kept me talking. The emergency room evaluation took 4 hours. A doctor I had never met, a physician who, I would learn much later, received a substantial referral fee from Garrison's financial advisor, signed a statement of cognitive concern. A judge reviewed it that same evening. He spent less than 15 minutes on my case. 15 minutes to decide the fate of a 64-year-old woman who had managed a staff of 300 for 3 decades. Emergency guardianship declared. Garrison named as guardian. I was placed at Sunridge Memory Care the following Wednesday. I did not have dementia. I did not have cognitive decline. I was a woman who had caught her son stealing from her and had made the mistake of warning him first. The first week at Sunridge was the hardest. Not because of the facility itself. It was clean. The staff were mostly kind. I had a private room. It was hard because every phone call I made was logged. Every visitor required advance approval from legal guardian. My legal guardian was my son. He came to see me 2 weeks after the commitment. He sat across from me in the family visiting lounge with those earnest eyes and said, "Mom, I just need you to sign over the power of attorney for the remaining estate accounts while you're here, so everything's protected." I looked at him and said, "No." His face didn't change. "We'll try again when you're feeling more like yourself." I am exactly like myself. He smiled the way you smile at someone who doesn't quite understand. He left. I sat in the visiting lounge for a long time after, looking at a fake fern in the corner, and I understood completely what I was up against. That was the day I started planning. Olive was the one who found the law reference volumes on the library cart, tucked behind large print romance novels and Reader's Digest anthologies, 2 outdated guides to Louisiana conservatorship statutes. I read them cover to cover. Then I read them again. I started to understand precisely what Garrison had done and what it would take to undo it. The emergency declaration rested on a single physician's letter from a doctor with undisclosed financial ties. It had been processed without a second evaluation. Due process in this case had been reduced to a rubber stamp because Garrison had moved fast, and courts tend to move fast right along with a concerned-looking adult child holding a doctor's signed statement. My daughter Maura was permitted to visit on the first Saturday of each month. Garrison had approved it himself. I imagine because he assumed she was on his side, or at least neutralized. He had been sending her selective medical reports, telling her I was deteriorating, managing what she saw and heard the same way he managed everything else. What he did not know about Maura could fill a courtroom. The first visit, she sat across from me and said all the right things in all the right flat, careful tones. She said I looked tired. She said Garrison was doing his best. She left a folder of assist documents and asked me to look them over. Her voice was professional, measured, the voice of a woman being very, very careful about what she said and did not say. But her hand, resting on top of the folder, moved. Her index finger traced 4 letters on the surface of the table, slow and deliberate. WAIT. I kept my face neutral. I picked up the folder. "I'll look these over," I said, and she left. Back in my room, I went through the folder page by page. On page 11, in the margin of a bank statement, in handwriting so small I needed my reading glasses at the window in direct afternoon light. A phone number and 2 words. Theron Nash. 3 days later, Olive's nephew, a man who visited every Sunday with chips and a genuine hatred of elder abuse, stemming from what had happened to his own grandmother, made a call on my behalf from the parking lot. 3 days after that, Olive pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand at breakfast. "Your daughter is thorough," she said quietly. "I'll give her that." I read the note in my room with the door closed. Theron Nash retained. Elder law specialist, LSU law, 12 years civil litigation. Found the physician, licensed in 3 states, all with pending complaints. Found Fallon River Consulting, $340K transferred in 11 months. Dissolved and re-registered as Fallon Properties Group. Same owner, new name. Independent psychiatrist hired. Dr. Pham retired, no financial ties, excellent record. 6 months, Mom. Hold on. I read it twice. Then I held the corner to Olive's candle on her dresser until there was nothing left. 6 months, I had done more with less. In those 6 months, I had nothing but time, and I used every hour of it. I read every legal document Garrison's team had filed. I learned the vocabulary of conservatorship law until it stopped feeling foreign. I wrote out, by hand, in a journal Olive's nephew had brought me disguised as a word search book, every anomaly I could recall about the transfers, the doctor's visit, the emergency petition timeline. Maura's monthly visits continued. Each one was a performance for any staff member who might be logging visitor observations. She talked about nothing. She left documents for me to review, always with something in the margins, always in ink so faint you had to hold the page at an angle in direct light. Month 4, all 11 transfers documented. 3 shell accounts, Fallon Properties Group. Same owner, registered the week after the guardianship was approved. Month 5, Dr. Larson's license under review in 2 states. His original statement to the court is being formally challenged. Theron filed the motion for independent evaluation. Month 6, Dr. Pham's appointment is confirmed, 2 weeks. I did not cry reading these. I sat on the edge of my bed and felt something colder and more useful than tears. I felt ready. The independent evaluation took 90 minutes. Dr. Pham was a small woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and the manner of someone who had spent a long career separating what was real from what someone wanted her to believe. She asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. She asked me to name the presidents. She asked about my work history, my daily routine, my reading habits, and what I would do if I smelled smoke coming from under a closed door. At the end, she said, "Mrs. Whitmore, there is no clinical basis for a finding of cognitive incapacity. My report goes to the court within the week." I thanked her quietly. After she left, I stood at the window and let myself breathe for the first time in a very long time. 2 weeks later, a judge reviewed her report and the mounting questions around Dr. Larson's credentials and dissolved the emergency guardianship order. Day 427, my last night at Sunridge. Olive and I sat on the edge of my bed after lights out and talked the way we had dozens of times before. "What's the first thing?" she asked. "A bath that lasts as long as I want." "And then?" I looked at the ceiling. "Then I start taking back what's mine." She was quiet. "You still love him?" She wasn't asking. I took a long time to answer. "He's my son. Some part of me will love him until I'm in the ground. But love doesn't mean I ignore what he did. Love doesn't mean I let him keep what he stole." "No," she said. "It doesn't mean that at all." "When I rebuild," I said, "I'm going to do something for women like us. Women who end up in places like this, not because they need to be here, but because someone decided it was convenient. There are too many of us, Olive." She nodded slowly. Then she handed me the small travel Bible she had been lending me since my second month. "Keep it," she said. November 14th, my last morning at Sunridge. Maura had brought me clothes the previous month. A charcoal blazer, dark slacks, a cream blouse. I had asked for something that looked like armor, and she had understood exactly what I meant. At 9:15, the discharge paperwork was complete. The automatic doors slid open. The November air hit me like a hand to the face, cold and real, and nothing like recycled facility air. I stopped on the front walk and let the pale Louisiana sun fall on my face. There were cameras, 3 local news vans at the edge of the lot, tipped by Theron's office, and there, standing near a rental SUV in the center of the parking lot, were my son and his wife. Garrison wore a charcoal suit. He held white tulips. Not my favorites, which told me everything about how well he actually knew me. Fallon stood beside him in a camel coat, her expression composed into something that resembled warmth. They had planned this. A welcome home scene, staged for cameras. Concerned son reuniting with his fragile, recovering mother. I started walking. Garrison moved toward me, tulips extended. "Mom, welcome home. We've been so worried." I walked past him. Not around him, past him, the way you pass a lamppost. He was part of the scenery. He did not exist in a way that deserved acknowledgement. "Mom." His hand caught my arm. His grip was harder than it needed to be. "Stop. Get in the car. We can talk this out. We can work everything out." I stopped, turned my head slowly, looked at his hand on my arm. The cameras were rolling. "Let go," I said, each word measured. "Or I will tell every one of those reporters what you did to put me in there. Your choice. You have 3 seconds. He let go. I kept walking. Behind me, Fallon's composure fractured. "She's unstable. You can see it. She needs more time." A car engine. The quiet, powerful kind. A silver sedan that pulled into the lot like it had already won whatever argument it was about to enter. From the driver's side came a man in his early 50s, compact and unhurried, moving with the ease of someone accustomed to being the most prepared person in the room. Theron Nash. He walked directly to me, ignoring everything else in the parking lot. "Mrs. Whitmore." His voice was calm and warm in exactly the right proportions. "Everything's ready." I shook his hand. He opened the rear door. I got in. Through the tinted window, as we pulled away, I watched my son's face cycle through confusion. Then shock. Then the specific whitening terror of a man who has just realized the trap has closed. He found out the full shape of it 4 hours later. Garrison was at a title company in Metairie, seated across from a developer named Hofstede, who had been circling the 3 rental properties for months. The purchase contract was an inch thick. The pen was in Garrison's hand. His phone rang, his financial advisor. He ignored it, rang again. He excused himself. The accounts, his advisor said, barely controlled. All of them, the estate accounts, the rental management accounts, Fallon Properties, frozen. Court order filed this morning. Garrison walked back into the conference room. The pen was still on the table. The developer had his phone out. He was reading something on the screen. And he had the expression of a man who was very carefully deciding how to exit a room. "Your mother held a press conference," Hofstede said quietly, 40 minutes ago. The footage, shot outside Sunridge, where I had stopped briefly at a small podium Theron's team had arranged, showed me in my charcoal blazer, speaking without notes. 14 months ago, my son filed a fraudulent guardianship petition and had me placed in a memory care facility against my will. During that time, $340,000 were transferred from my estate into shell companies controlled by his wife. I am here because an independent evaluation confirmed what anyone who spoke with me for 10 minutes already knew. There was never anything wrong with my mind. There was something wrong with my son's character. Legal proceedings begin today. The developer closed his phone, stood. "I think we're done, Mr. Whitmore." Garrison sat alone with the unsigned contract on the table in front of him. His card at a cafe 30 minutes later came back declined. What followed moved faster than I expected and slower than I wanted, which is the nature of justice. The civil suit was filed within the week. Mora's documentation was extraordinary. 14 months of transfers, email chains, the connection between the signing judge and Garrison's advisor, Dr. Larson's suppressed licensing complaints in 2 states, every entity registration timestamped to the week the guardianship was approved. Mora testified. She sat in that chair and described what 14 months of it had actually cost. Visiting me every month while performing compliance for her brother's benefit, documenting everything she witnessed, carrying all of it alone. When she talked about the morning, she traced the word wait on the table with her finger. Her voice shook. But it held. "Why not go to authorities sooner?" the attorney asked. "Because Garrison is smart," Mora said. "I needed evidence he couldn't explain away. I had to be patient. That is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life." The civil judgment came down on a Friday. Fraud, elder financial abuse, fraudulent use of conservatorship statutes, full restitution plus damages. Criminal charges followed 3 weeks later: wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy. I sat in the front row for sentencing. Garrison and Fallon were at the defendant's table in the diminished, hollowed way of people who have spent 6 months in a rented apartment, learning what their actual choices had cost them. When the judge read the sentences, Garrison, 7 years, Fallon, 4, I did not feel the satisfaction I had imagined. I felt something quieter, the particular exhaustion of a very long fight finally over. Mora's hand found mine under the table. 2 years later, I stood at a podium at the Louisiana Elder Justice Coalition's annual luncheon and looked out at 300 people. When my son put me in that facility, I said, he thought he was making me disappear. He was wrong. He was making me angrier, more educated, and considerably more determined. The Whitmore Initiative, which my daughter Mara built from the ground up while I was inside, has now helped 47 women navigate fraudulent conservatorship proceedings across Louisiana and Mississippi. We have volunteer attorneys, a hotline, and a panel of independent psychiatric evaluators who will assess any woman referred to us at no cost. I looked at Mora in the front row. She was pressing her lips together in the line I had known since she was 7 years old and trying not to cry at the dentist. I spent 14 months in a room I did not choose, being told my mind was broken by people who needed it to be. What I learned there is that the people who work hardest to diminish you are always more afraid. of what you're capable of than you are. After, in the parking lot, Maura handed me coffee from the place I liked, the one with the chicory blend. We stood in the cooling November air. "Are you happy?" she asked. I thought about it, honestly. "I'm something better than happy," I said. "I'm free." She linked her arm through mine, and we walked to the car. 6 months after the sentencing, I drove to Claiborne Parish Correctional Center. Maura had asked me to go. She visited Garrison herself, monthly. She said he was different, quieter, spending time in the facility's records office, helping other inmates understand their paperwork appeals. She said he had asked about me. I almost said no. But Maura had given me 14 months of her life, and I owed her 1 hour of mine. The visitation room was everything that kind of room always is. Plexiglass, phones, fluorescent light pressing down on everything. Garrison appeared on the other side, looking hollowed out. Thinner, grayer at the temples, wearing the facility uniform the way a man wears something he has decided to stop fighting. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I don't have words for what I did," he finally said. His voice had the specific flatness of someone who has spent a long time alone with himself. "I've tried to write them down. I can't find any that fit." I waited. "Dad's letters," he said. "The ones he wrote you before you were married. Maura brought them to me. I've been reading them." He looked at the receiver in his hand. He was better than I knew how to be. He wrote about integrity like it was something you practice every day, not something you claim when it's convenient. I thought I understood what he meant. He paused. I didn't. "No," I said, "you didn't." Silence between us. "I'm not asking you to forgive me." His voice was low. "I know I don't have that right. I just needed you to know I understand now what I actually took. Not the money, not the properties. What I took was your sense of safety in your own family, your right to trust your own children." He looked at me through the glass. "I took that from you." I looked at my son for a long time. "You took 14 months, I said. You took my certainty." For a while, even knowing what you had done, I lay awake in that room asking myself what I had done wrong to raise a person capable of this. He did not try to defend himself. He nodded once. "I cannot forgive you today," I said. "Maybe not for a long time. Maybe not ever. I haven't decided." I put my hand flat on the plexiglass. "But you have 5 years left. If you spend them becoming someone your father would have recognized, you call Maura when you're out. She'll tell me, and we'll see." Garrison's eyes filled. He raised his hand and placed it opposite mine on the other side of the glass. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Don't thank me," I said. "Earn it." I hung up the phone, walked to the door, stopped once, not to look back, but to feel the full weight of what this room held, and to decide, deliberately, which parts of it were mine to carry and which parts belonged to him alone. Then I walked out into the Louisiana afternoon. Maura was in the parking lot. She had 2 cups of coffee and handed me one without a word, the way she always does when she knows words won't reach what needs reaching. We drove home in the kind of quiet that only exists between 2 people who have been through something together, that no one else will ever fully understand. The road stretching out ahead, the coffee warm in my hands, and the life I had clawed back, the wreckage of my son's choices, still entirely, stubbornly, unbreakably mine.